you are able to get answers as soon as possible, which means to say that Excel will help you to solve the factors very fast. In finance, we are more interested in budget and forecast, whereas in sales and marketing, we are more interested on ROI and customer data. You're looking into a data which is actually conditional in nature. You want all sets of data to come inside with features, with performance levels coming into it. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 4, 4th semester BBA, Information Technology for Business, where we're going to talk about Microsoft Excel in business. Probably the one software that everybody loves to talk about in the modern days is always about MS Office. Now, MS Office is a collection of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Access, and so many other features. But out of which MS Excel is one thing that fundamentally everybody loves, because that is the software, that is the application that people would love to use it for any business. And that's why we say this is the fundamental business tool that is used for data management, financial analysis, reporting, featuring functions like pivot tables for efficiency. Now, the primary aim of any application, and especially when you are looking at an application like Excel, the aim is to make the numerical data more accessible, make it more easier for the business to do it, and most importantly, enable automation, budgeting, forecasting, significantly boosting the productivity and accuracy. Now, for every vertical, Excel is used. We are not the only people to say that only the finance department will use Excel, others will not. But rather, if you look into the entire picture, Excel is used from all aspects, from all verticals as far as possible. So everybody would use this tool for forecasting and for the accuracy measurement, finding out the differences, primarily trying to use this for efficiency purpose. Now, as we move further, we're also going to talk about the key Excel functions that we are going to talk about in the business. We're going to talk about the adjustment factors which are used to calculate the loan payment, interest, and analyze financing. Then we're going to talk about the NPV, IRR, which is very much useful, sum, average, and subtotal, which are now coming into picture. Now, the first thing about Excel is very interesting factor is that why do we use Excel? One reason is that to calculate the huge number of data, especially mathematical functions. The second reason is that Excel is one thing where you can automate a lot of factors so that you are able to get answers as soon as possible, which means to say that Excel will help you to solve the factors very fast. Now, the time management, as we are talking about, especially when we talk about loan repayments, analyzing the financial aspects, we see that there is always a functionality, there's always a methodology under which this comes into picture. So in that aspect, in that ideology altogether, as we are talking about, what is very important for us is to calculate the investments. How does the return comes in? Where is that one has to repay back the loan? What is the time length? How do we analyze a financial problem that has been given? How much interest rate to be paid? And is the business really good or productive enough to invest? What will be the internal rate of return and all those factors? So all these things are quite interesting for all of us. So that's why this becomes very important for us. Now, what happens here is that when we talk about the sum, average, and subtotal, this is very important for us. For the daily financial reporting and expenses tracking, we use this. Now, that's also very important. Why? Because whenever we are talking about the sum, we are talking about averages, and then we are talking about the totals, automatically Excel comes into picture, because this is the most fundamental and simple application that we keep using here. Now, in any point of time, the expense tracking is very important. It tracks, find out how much are we spending on a daily basis, where are we spending it, is that expense actually needed for us? Is it good? Is it bad? Can we adjust those expenses? All those functionalities comes into picture. Followed by which, let's talk about the data analysis now and the lookup function. The lookup function is something essential for matching data, reconciling records, and linking databases. Now, as we move further in the concept of Excel, one has to understand that the ideology of Excel, as we are speaking about, is to primarily match data and records. Now, that is very, very important for each one of us in the modern day world. When you're looking at a database which has got millions and millions of data, it would take a hell of a lot of time for us in order to match, to find out that exact. Let's say that some record which happened some 5 or 6 years back, or probably 2 years back, you want to see and you want to match a same kind of calculation. You can't keep scrolling the entire screen for hours together. Rather, you can use this feature called as the extended lookup or the VLOOKUP, the vertical lookup. So what primarily we tend to do is that it can check up for all the records that are available there. Now, the index and match, it's a more flexible and a faster alternative for VLOOKUP for a larger data sets. So as we are talking about excelling the functions and taking it forward, we also need to understand that these databases are primarily used as data sets which are using for faster and alternative arrangements altogether. So sometimes we might find that a more flexible, faster alternative factors are available where data can be manipulated faster, data can be looked into faster, and that's how the entire data set is also being looked in terms of the calculation perspective. Now, when we are talking about data analysis as of today, which is becoming a very hot topic, the most important is your sum countif, which is where you use a targeted analysis, calculating the total sales for a specific region or for a salesperson. Now, larger companies like Hindustan Lever Limited, or when you're looking at Procter & Gamble, all these kind of companies are very much interested in understanding sales specific per region wise, country wise, or area wise. So definitely what happens, they would look into Excel as a functionality which actually helps them to understand how the sales is moving according to the targets. Many times what happens here is that when you're launching a new product and you want to see the acceptance level of that product in the market, you get into something called as this analysis. So this is very, very important for each one of us as we are talking about the targeted analysis factors. Now let's move further to understand some of the functions more. And one of them is the if, and, or. The moment when I use this word itself, this creates a conditional formula factor. Now, all of us are so specific about our calculations and results. Sometimes what happens is that we need everything in one shot. So sometimes what happens here is that we are looking at multiple data, but in a conditional manner. We are not just looking at data and saying that, yes, I'm happy with the outcome. Rather, you're looking into a data which is actually conditional in nature. You want all sets of data to come inside with features, with performance levels coming into it. So sometimes you might find that I need certain formulas which will actually help me in decision making. So at that point of time, I'm going to give you these conditions called as if, or, and formulas, which is going to help you to understand your invoices. So we are also going to talk about something called as trim and lens, cleans the data by removing extra spaces, counting of characters, which is very much important. Why? Because we don't want those extra calculation. We don't want some manipulation. We don't want extra factors to be done, which leads to a change in the total. And concatenation, which combines text from different cells, such as merging first and last name, which is very important these days, because when you're running the database of customers, you need that concatenation basic to understand the first name and last name. So overall, when you understand and start speaking about Excel, you see there's a whole lot of formula which makes Excel very, very interesting. So this becomes quite interesting for each one of us to start understanding how does the formula works. Now, the next one is the pivot tables, graphs, and the macros all together. All these three things are my definitely favorites. Why? Because whenever we talk about projects today, we use pivot tables and charts and graph to make the project look better. Pivot tables will quickly summarize, filter, analyze large data, and present it exactly the way how you want it. So you can categorize the data as per your need, as per the outcome, and you can present it in a much more effective manner. Similarly, charts and graph, which visualizes performance data for management report. Nowadays, more than the numbers and theory, when you represent data in an artistic form, in a visualized form, then it gives us a better meaning, a better understanding altogether, and the management would also feel that it's making more sense. So that's why we bring data management here. Next, we talk about macros in VBA, which is very, very essential here. It automates the repetitive task like report generation. Yes, that's very much important, because when you are generating data where you need to do a particular function again and again and again, then you don't get into this retyping the task. Rather, you build in a macro or a VBA, which makes the task make it for you on a long run basis. So that would be able to help you in terms of running the situation furthermore faster. Next, when we go into the core business application, we're talking about finance, we're talking about sales, we're talking about operations, we're talking about HR. Now that's very, very important here. All the four verticals which are very, very interesting for us, which means to say that finance, as we talk about budgeting, forecasting, financial information, modeling and analysis. Then we talk about the sales and marketing, tracking of KPIs, analyzing ROI on campaigns. All these things are the core business application. Now, each vertical uses Excel in their own way, in their own methodology. Rather, I would say that these are people who use Excel in such an interesting manner that the entire functionality becomes even more, complicated, but at the same time helpful for the management. Now, when you look into finance versus marketing, in finance, we are more interested in budget and forecast. Whereas in sales and marketing, we are more interested on ROI and customer data. So one side, when you're tracking about your credit versus the debit, the expenses versus the income kind of thing. The other side, you're tracking about your revenue, your sales, and your growth aspect. So look at the way how Excel can be turned around for the business purpose. Similarly, when we talk about operations versus HR, from an operation perspective, my job is only to track the schedule, the inventory, and to see whether we have the goods necessary for the business to happen. That's for the manufacturing purpose. From a HR perspective, my job is to see whether employees are there to run the operations. So every time there is going to be some business activity, Excel becomes a very productive tool trying to make us understand how we can modify its function to undergo or to make the business even more effective. So that's why I say this as a core business application altogether. Followed by the transaction processing system, which is a part of this support system altogether. Why do I bring TPS into it? Very, very important here, because Microsoft Excel is the core function, is the core software that helps in MIS, that helps in the transaction processing system. And it is very important. Why? Because the TPS handles the operational data, which becomes a feeder for the MIS to generate the structured tools, and the database helps in decision making, provides interactive tools for the complex unstructured decision making. They often integrate with TPS feeding into MIS and DSS. So at some point of time, let's try to understand this factor, saying that this is very, very important for us. Now, in fact, we try to also understand that why these are crucial and the hierarchical information systems are needed for us. At some point of time, let's understand that TPS and MIS are an integrated factors of Excel at any point of time. And so this becomes very, very important for all of us to understand how the handling of data keeps going from one point to another, whether it is structured or unstructured decision making, as we are talking about. Similarly, as we go about, the purpose of TPS is to manage the routine day-to-day business transaction Whereas when we are talking about here, the level of operational management that comes into picture, the key function ensures data integrity and data storage in future, especially when we talk about the ATM transaction. So TPS is something which we are using on a daily purpose, and the main objective is to look into inventory, payroll, and sales, which are the key factors where TPS comes hand in hand. With this, let me come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the facts and figures that we have spoken here would be of a great help to you, both in terms of practical as well as in the theoretical walk of life. The Microsoft functions do not just end with this, but we have a lot of functions which we will be discussing about in the upcoming sessions, which will be of a great interest to you. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session. You have a great day ahead.